I never thought a dusty old bookstore would change my life. That autumn morning, I was hunting for The Soul of Surfing, a rare first edition that could help elevate my teaching methods. The antique bookstore's bell chimed as I pushed open the heavy wooden door. "Morning, Mrs. Peterson," I called out to the elderly owner. She smiled, her wrinkled face lighting up at the sight of a regular customer. The familiar scent of aged paper and leather bindings filled my nostrils as I navigated the narrow aisles. My fingers traced along weathered spines in the sports section. The morning light filtered through tall windows, dancing on dust particles. Then I saw it, the distinctive blue binding I'd been searching for. As I reached for it, another hand brushed against mine. "Oh, sorry," we said in unison. I turned to face the owner of that soft hand. She had the most striking green eyes I'd ever seen, framed by loose brunette waves. Her gentle smile made my heart skip. "You're interested in surfing?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm Natalie. I study marine ecosystems," she said. "This book has some historical data I need for my research." "I'm Layla. I actually teach surfing at Lake Caroline," I replied, still holding the book. "Maybe we could share it?" Her eyes lit up. "How about we discuss it over coffee? There's a nice cafe around the corner." 20 minutes later, we sat in worn leather chairs at the daily grind. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Natalie's passion for marine conservation matched my love for teaching surfing. She spoke about her latest project to protect local waterways, her hands moving animatedly. "Most people don't realize how connected everything is," she said, leaning forward. "The health of our waters affects everything." I found myself captivated by her enthusiasm. "You should see the joy on people's faces when they first stand on a board," I shared. "It creates this instant connection with the water." We talked for hours, losing track of time. The book lay forgotten on the table between us. When the cafe started closing, we reluctantly stood to leave. "I'd love to learn surfing," Natalie mentioned casually. "Would you teach me?" My heart raced at the prospect. "I'd be happy to. Here's my card." As I watched her walk away, clutching the shared book, something told me this was more than a chance encounter. Mrs. Peterson's knowing smile when we left the bookstore suggested she felt it too. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those green eyes, and the way Natalie's face lit up when she talked about her work. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a story that would change both our lives forever. A week after our bookstore encounter, I stood at Lake Caroline's shore, watching Natalie approach in a sleek wetsuit. The morning sun painted the water in shades of gold, creating the perfect backdrop for her first lesson. "Ready to catch some waves?" I called out, trying to hide how my breath caught at the sight of her. She looked nervous but determined, her hair pulled back in a neat braid. "As ready as I'll ever be," she laughed, adjusting the borrowed surfboard under her arm. I noticed she'd been reading our shared book. She was already using the correct terminology. The lesson began with basics on the sand. I demonstrated the proper stance, watching her mirror my movements. Her athletic grace surprised me. When I helped adjust her position, the brief contact sent electricity through my fingers. "My last relationship ended because I was too focused on work," she shared suddenly as we sat taking a break. The confession caught me off guard. She couldn't understand why I'd spend weekends tracking water pollution instead of brunching. My heart skipped at the casual revelation. "I get that," I replied, drawing patterns in the sand. "My ex said teaching surfing wasn't a real career. She wanted me to work in her father's insurance company." Natalie's eyes met mine with understanding. "Sounds suffocating." The rest of the morning flew by. Natalie proved to be a natural, managing to stand on her board after just a few attempts. Her triumphant smile when she first rode a wave to shore made my heart soar. We continued meeting for lessons throughout the week. Each session brought us closer, conversations flowing as naturally as the water beneath our boards. She told me about growing up in coastal Maine, where she first fell in love with marine biology. I shared stories about learning to surf from my grandmother. One evening, after a particularly successful lesson, we stayed to watch the sunset. The sky blazed orange and pink, reflecting off the lake's surface. Natalie sat close enough that our shoulders touched. "I never expected to find someone who understands both parts of my life," she said softly. "The water and the work." I turned to respond and found her face inches from mine. The dying sunlight caught in her eyes, turning them to emerald fire. Without thinking, I leaned forward. Our lips met in a gentle kiss that tasted of lake water and possibility. When we pulled apart, Natalie's smile outshone the sunset. "I've wanted to do that since the bookstore," she admitted. "Me too," I whispered, pulling her close for another kiss. The water lapped at our feet, a rhythm that matched our beating hearts. Later that night, as I lay in bed replaying the evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. "Same time tomorrow?" I smiled at the screen, already anticipating our next meeting. The warmth of our kisses lingered, promising something deeper than either of us had expected to find. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a tiny voice whispered caution about the challenges ahead. If only I'd known then how right that voice would be. The video hit social media on a quiet Tuesday morning. Someone had filmed our sunset kiss at the lake, adding cruel comments about inappropriate behavior at a family location. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. "Have you seen this?" Natalie's voice trembled when she called. I was already staring at my surf school's Facebook page, watching the negative reviews pour in. "Don't read the comments," I said, but it was too late. We both knew the damage was spreading. Local parents were threatening to pull their kids from my classes. The video had somehow reached every corner of our small community. I tried to maintain normalcy, heading to the lake for my afternoon lessons. Only half my students showed up. One mother approached me, speaking in hushed tones about values and influence on children. My hands shook as I loaded equipment into my truck that evening. Natalie wasn't faring much better. Her conservation project, which had been gaining momentum, suddenly faced unexpected resistance. The local business council, previously supportive, was reconsidering their funding. "They're claiming concerns about project management," she told me over coffee. Dark circles under her eyes revealed sleepless nights. But the timing makes it obvious. The harassment escalated quickly. Anonymous accounts flooded my surf school's social media with hateful messages. Someone started a petition to revoke my teaching permit at Lake Caroline. The words hurt more than I wanted to admit. "We could lay low for a while," I suggested one evening, watching Natalie pace my living room. "Wait for it to blow over." She stopped, fixing me with those determined green eyes. "That's exactly what they want, to shame us into hiding." But the pressure was relentless. Natalie's research presentations at local schools were mysteriously canceled. My advanced surfing class dropped from 12 students to 3. The whispers followed us everywhere in town. The breaking point came when I found a crude message scratched into my truck's paint. Natalie held me as I broke down, my tough exterior finally cracking. "We didn't do anything wrong," I kept repeating. "No, we didn't," she agreed, her voice fierce. "And we won't let them make us feel like we did." That night, we sat on my porch, planning our next moves. The lake stretched before us, calm and indifferent to the storm in our lives. Natalie's hand found mine in the darkness. "My research shows how everything in nature is connected," she mused. "One small change affects the whole ecosystem. Maybe that's what scares them, seeing something different in their carefully controlled environment." I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. "Then we'll be that change." As if in response to our defiance, my phone buzzed with another notification. A local news station wanted to interview us about cyberbullying. Natalie and I exchanged looks, recognizing the opportunity. "Ready to make some waves?" I asked. She smiled, that determined glint back in her eyes. "With you? Always." We stayed up late strategizing, fueled by coffee and righteous anger. The lake's waters reflected the stars above, reminding us of that first sunset kiss. Whatever came next, we would face it together, like waves meeting the shore, unstoppable and natural as the tide itself. The local news interview aired during prime time. Natalie and I sat side by side on my couch, watching ourselves on screen. The reporter had been surprisingly sympathetic, focusing on the impact of cyberbullying rather than sensationalizing our relationship. "Hate has no place in our community," I heard myself say on TV. "Teaching surfing is about connecting with nature, not politics." Natalie's segment followed, her professional demeanor commanding respect. "Environmental conservation affects everyone. Personal attacks won't change scientific facts." The response was immediate and polarizing. My phone exploded with messages, some supportive, others even more venomous than before. Jackson seemed to split down the middle overnight. The next morning, I arrived at the lake to find love winds painted on the dock in bright colors. By afternoon, someone had tried to wash it off, leaving a messy blur. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Support came from unexpected places. Mrs. Peterson from the bookstore put up a hate-free zone sign. The cafe where we'd first shared coffee offered us free drinks. But for every ally, there seemed to be an opponent lurking. "Look at this," Natalie said one evening, showing me her laptop. A local church group had started a campaign against her conservation project. "They're claiming I have a radical agenda." I pulled her close, feeling her trembling with frustration. "Your only agenda is saving our waters." That night, something shifted between us. Maybe it was the shared battle, or perhaps the weight of standing together against the world. Our kisses grew deeper, more urgent. Clothes fell away like autumn leaves. We made love for the first time with the sound of rain tapping against windows. Every touch felt like coming home, every whisper a revolution. In the darkness, our bodies spoke truths our words couldn't express. Dawn found us tangled in sheets, stronger in our vulnerability. Natalie traced patterns on my skin, her touch gentle as morning light. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. The following days brought more challenges. A group of parents staged a protest at my surf class. Natalie's research equipment was vandalized, but something had changed inside us. Fear gave way to determination. We started documenting everything, every threat, every act of vandalism, every suspicious cancellation. Local LGBTQ groups reached out, offering support and legal advice. Our story was becoming bigger than us. One afternoon, while reviewing security footage of the vandalism, Natalie noticed something. "These attacks seem coordinated," she mused. "Too organized for random hate." I leaned over her shoulder, studying the timestamps. "You think someone's orchestrating this?" Before she could answer, my phone rang. A former student's mother, speaking in hushed tones. "You should know," she said. "There's a meeting tonight. They're planning something big." That evening, holding Natalie in my arms, we knew we'd reached a turning point. The simple joy of finding each other in that bookstore had evolved into something more, a stand for love against hatred, for truth against prejudice. "Whatever comes next," I said, kissing her forehead, "we face it together." She nodded, her fingers intertwining with mine, like waves meeting the shore. Outside, the lake waters lapped steadily against the beach, constant despite the storms of human making. We had each other now, and sometimes that's all the strength you need to keep fighting. The beach cleanup event wasn't my idea of fighting back at first. The suggestion came from one of my remaining students, a teenager named Sarah. "Show them what you're really about," she said. I pitched it to Natalie over dinner. Her eyes lit up immediately. Perfect timing. The lake's pollution levels have been rising. We spent a week organizing, expecting maybe 20 people to show up. The morning of the event, I stood on the beach, coffee growing cold in my hands. Natalie squeezed my shoulder as we waited. Then they started coming. First in pairs, then in groups. Local high school students, coffee shop regulars, even some parents who'd pulled their kids from my classes. Mrs. Peterson arrived with homemade cookies and a stack of environmental pamphlets. "This is incredible," Natalie whispered, counting over 60 volunteers. The sight of them, armed with trash bags and determination, brought tears to my eyes. We split into teams, tackling different sections of the shoreline. Natalie led a group taking water samples, explaining the impact of microplastics. I organized the cleanup crews, showing them how to document what they found. "Look at this," called Sarah, holding up a waterlogged tablet. In the collected trash, we discovered something unexpected: documents. Waterproof bags full of papers, deliberately dumped. Natalie's hands trembled as she examined them. "These are industrial waste reports," she said, altered ones. Her research background kicked in as she photographed everything. While volunteers continued cleaning, we pieced together a disturbing pattern. The documents revealed local companies falsifying environmental reports, the same companies that had recently withdrawn support from Natalie's project. The trolls, I realized. They're not random haters, they're paid. Natalie nodded grimly. They wanted to discredit us before we could expose this. The cleanup continued into afternoon. Someone ordered pizzas. Children played in the safe areas while parents collected trash. A local news crew arrived, capturing the community spirit. "This is the real story," the reporter said, filming volunteers sharing lunch. "Not hate, but hope." By sunset, we had filled 3 dumpsters with trash and gathered enough evidence to launch an investigation. But more importantly, we'd shown Jackson a different narrative. My mom was wrong about you, a former student told me, helping pack up supplies. You're making our lake better. That evening, exhausted but triumphant, Natalie and I sat on my porch. The setting sun painted the cleaned beach in golden hues. Her head rested on my shoulder as she reviewed the documents. We've got them, she said softly. But they won't go down without a fight. I kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of lake water and victory. Let them try, we're stronger together. The day had shown us something vital. Hate might be loud, but love runs deeper. For every troll hiding behind a screen, there were dozens of real people willing to stand beside us. What's next? I asked, watching stars appear over the lake. Natalie smiled, that determined glint in her eyes. We take this evidence to people who can use it, and we keep teaching. Keep protecting our waters. Keep loving, I added. That's the easiest part, she replied, pulling me closer. As night settled over the lake, we could feel the tide turning. The cleanup hadn't just restored the beach, it had restored our faith in community. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight we celebrated this small victory, knowing that sometimes the strongest response to hate is simply to love more openly, work more diligently, and stand more firmly in your truth. The truth has a way of surfacing, like debris after a storm. Natalie's research team discovered alarming levels of chemical waste in Lake Caroline's tributary streams. The numbers were too high to be natural. Look at these patterns, she said, spreading maps across my kitchen table. Red markers indicated contamination sites, forming a trail leading to 3 industrial plants. I traced the path with my finger. All owned by Richardson Holdings. The same company that started the social media campaign against us, Natalie added, her voice tight with anger. The morning mail brought the first threat letter to my surf school. Plain white envelope, typed words. Drop it or lose everything. I found Natalie at her research station, clutching an identical envelope. They're getting desperate, she said, hands shaking slightly. We must be close to something big. Despite the threats, we organized a fundraiser for lake conservation. Local businesses, inspired by our beach cleanup, offered support. The event would feature environmental speakers, live music, and a silent auction. The evening started perfectly. Fairy lights transformed the lakeside venue. People filled every seat, their presence a quiet rebellion against the intimidation tactics. During Natalie's presentation, she revealed satellite images showing systematic dumping. The audience gasped at before and after photos of affected areas. I watched from the back, pride mixing with concern for her safety. Our waters connect us all, she concluded. Their health reflects our community's values. The applause was thunderous. Donations poured in, surpassing our goals. As the crowd mingled, Natalie pulled me into a quiet corner. I've never felt stronger than with you beside me, she whispered. We made love that night with an intensity born of triumph and defiance. Every touch declared our commitment to each other and our cause. The moonlight through my bedroom window painted silver patterns on our skin. Morning brought new evidence. Anonymous sources began sharing documents, each revealing deeper corruption. Richardson Holdings had been burying environmental reports for years. They didn't count on people caring, I said, reviewing the files with Natalie. Or on us finding each other, she added, squeezing my hand. The threats escalated. Dead fish appeared on my doorstep. Natalie's research equipment suffered mysterious malfunctions. But for every act of intimidation, we received twice as many messages of support. Local environmental groups joined our cause. Independent labs verified Natalie's findings. The story grew beyond Richardson's control. One evening, reviewing security footage, we noticed a pattern. The same car appeared before each incident of vandalism. Its license plate led to a private security firm. We've got them, Natalie breathed, eyes shining with vindication. That night, holding each other close, we felt the shift in momentum. The truth was emerging, unstoppable as the tides. Whatever happens next, I whispered into her hair, we've already won. She lifted her head, green eyes meeting mine. How so? They wanted to shame us into silence. Instead, they gave us a bigger voice. Natalie smiled, tracing my cheek with gentle fingers, and brought us closer together. Outside, the lake waters lapped at the shore, carrying secrets soon to surface. We had started this journey searching for a rare book, but found something rarer still, the courage to stand together against injustice, and love strong enough to weather any storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight belonged to us. In the quiet darkness, our hearts beat in rhythm with the waves, steady and sure as the truth we fought to protect. The morning started like any other until I pulled into the surf school parking lot. My heart stopped. Spray painted across the building's front were words too hateful to repeat. Equipment lay scattered and broken across the beach. My hands shook as I called the police. Then Natalie. She arrived before the officers, wrapping me in a fierce embrace. "Those cowards," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They only attack in darkness." The police took photos, filed reports, but we all knew the likelihood of catching the vandals was slim. Local news crews arrived, their cameras capturing the destruction. Sarah, my teenage student, showed up with cleaning supplies. "We'll help fix this," she said, determination in her young face. More supporters arrived throughout the morning. They brought paint, tools, and encouragement. But the damage went deeper than physical destruction. That evening, Natalie paced my living room. "Maybe we should take a break," she suggested. "Leave town until things calm down." The words hit me like ice water. "You want to leave?" "Want to?" "No." She stopped pacing, tears in her eyes. "But I can't watch them destroy everything you've built." I crossed the room, taking her hands in mine. "This is exactly what they want." "I know." Her voice cracked. "But what if next time it's worse? What if they hurt you?" The fear in her eyes mirrored my own. We'd known the risks of challenging powerful interests, but facing them was different. "I can't leave," I said softly. "This lake, these kids I teach, they're my life." Natalie pulled away, moving to the window. The lake stretched dark and endless beyond. "Then I'll stay too. We'll figure something out." But that night, lying alone in bed, doubt crept in. Was I being selfish, putting Natalie's safety at risk for my principles? Morning found me at the bookstore where we first met. Mrs. Peterson took one look at my face and put on coffee. "Love isn't supposed to be easy," she said, settling into her worn armchair. "But running from it is harder." I traced the spine of the surfing book that had brought Natalie and me together. "I'm scared of losing her." "Then don't." Mrs. Peterson's voice held steel beneath its gentleness. "Fight harder." The bell chimed. Natalie stood in the doorway, sunlight haloing her hair. Without words, she crossed the room and pulled me close. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was afraid. But leaving isn't the answer." Mrs. Peterson quietly disappeared into the stacks, leaving us alone among the books that had witnessed our beginning. "I love you," I said, the words carrying the weight of everything we faced. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Natalie's kiss tasted of coffee and certainty. "Together," she agreed. We spent the afternoon planning our next moves. The vandalism had generated unexpected sympathy. Support messages flooded in. Local businesses offered security cameras. Parents who'd withdrawn their kids started reaching out. "See?" Natalie smiled, reading the messages. "Light always overcomes darkness." That evening, we walked the lake shore, hands linked. The water reflected the setting sun, turning golden like possibility. "Remember our first kiss here?" I asked. "How could I forget?" She stopped, turning to face me. "It changed everything." "It's still changing things," I said, pulling her close. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." The lake lapped at our feet, constant despite all changes. Like our love, I thought, tested by storms but emerging stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, holding Natalie under the emerging stars, I knew we'd made the right choice. Some things are worth fighting for, worth staying for. Love is one of them. Change rippled through Jackson like waves after a storm. The morning after the vandalism, I arrived at the surf school to find local business owners waiting. "We're installing security cameras," announced Mike from the hardware store. "Free of charge." The cafe down the street offered to host my indoor classes during repairs. The local gym opened their pool for beginner lessons. Support flowed in from unexpected places. "This isn't just about us anymore," Natalie said, reviewing the security footage from our new cameras. "Look at this." The footage showed a familiar car, the same one we'd spotted before. But this time, we caught a clear shot of the license plate. Local reporters dug deeper into the connection between the private security firm and Richardson Holdings. The story grew legs, running in papers beyond Jackson. Someone leaked internal emails, Natalie told me one evening, her laptop screen reflecting in her eyes. They prove Richardson orchestrated the cyberbullying campaign. The evidence was damning. Paid trolls, coordinated attacks, all traced back to corporate headquarters. Their desperate attempt to silence us had backfired spectacularly. My surf school became a symbol of resistance. New students signed up daily. Parents who'd pulled their kids out returned, apologizing. "You taught me more than surfing," Sarah said during a lesson. "You showed us how to stand up for what's right." The community organized a protection watch. Volunteers took shifts monitoring the lake at night. Local police increased patrols. One morning, I found a stack of letters on my doorstep. Not threats this time, support from other surf schools nationwide. They offered equipment, resources, solidarity. "The tide's turning," I told Natalie over dinner. "People are choosing sides." She nodded, but her eyes held worry. Richardson won't go down quietly. She was right. The company launched a PR campaign, claiming environmental responsibility. But their words rang hollow against the evidence. Local media exposed their history of violations. Former employees came forward with stories of covered-up spills. The truth emerged like sunrise over water. "They're losing control of the narrative," Natalie said, watching another damaging news report. "Their shareholders are asking questions." The corporate response turned desperate. They offered to fund my surf school's repairs, with conditions: silence about the pollution, distance from Natalie's research. "Not a chance," I told their lawyer. "Some things aren't for sale." That evening, walking the lakeshore with Natalie, we spotted families returning to the water. Children played in the shallows while parents watched from beach chairs. "Remember when we thought we'd have to leave?" Natalie asked, squeezing my hand. "Seems like another lifetime," I replied, pulling her close. The sunset painted the lake in shades of victory. Each wave carried the promise of change, each ripple a reminder of our strength together. Later, reviewing the day's security footage, we noticed something new. The suspicious car hadn't appeared in days. The threats had stopped. "Think it's over?" I asked. Natalie shook her head. "Not over, but changing, like the tides." She was right. This wasn't an ending but a transformation. The community had chosen truth over intimidation, love over fear. As night settled over the lake, we stood on my porch, watching stars reflect on the water. Each one a point of light against darkness, like the countless supporters who'd stood with us. "Whatever comes next," I whispered, holding Natalie close. "We're ready." The lake whispered back, its gentle waves a reminder that the strongest forces in nature aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're as quiet as truth, as steady as love, as persistent as water wearing away stone. Success tastes sweeter when shared. Our environmental awareness campaign launched on a perfect autumn morning, the lake sparkling like scattered diamonds. "Ready?" Natalie asked, adjusting the presentation screen. Local news crews set up their equipment while volunteers arranged chairs on the beach. "Born ready," I replied, watching the crowd gather. The turnout exceeded our wildest hopes. The campaign wasn't just about water quality anymore. It had evolved into something bigger, a statement about community values, about standing up to corporate bullying. "Today marks a new chapter," Natalie began her presentation. Her voice carried across the hushed audience. "Not just for our lake, but for our town." The evidence was undeniable. Satellite images, water samples, leaked documents, all telling the same story. Richardson Holdings had treated our lake like their private dump for years. During the question session, a small boy raised his hand. "Can we swim in the lake again?" Natalie's smile lit up the morning. "Soon. That's why we're all here." The campaign gained momentum like a wave building strength. Schools invited us to speak. Environmental groups offered partnerships. Even state officials took notice. My surf school became more than a business. We integrated environmental education into every lesson. Students learned about wave patterns and water conservation alongside surfing techniques. "You've created something special here," Sarah said, helping me clean boards after class. "A movement." The afternoon light caught Natalie's hair as she demonstrated water testing to a group of students. My heart swelled watching her share her passion. That evening, we we made a big decision. Let's move in together, I suggested as we sat on my porch swing. Natalie's kiss tasted of possibility. I thought you'd never ask. The next few days passed in a blur of boxes and rearranged furniture. Each item we unpacked felt like another step toward permanence. Where should we put the surfing book? Natalie asked, holding our shared treasure. Front and center, I replied. Where it all began. Our home became a testament to second chances. Photos of us at the lake mixed with scientific charts on the walls. Surfboards leaned against research equipment. The campaign's success reflected in small victories. Richardson Holdings announced voluntary environmental reviews. Local businesses pledged to protect the lake. We did it, Natalie whispered one night as we watched moonlight dance on water. We're just getting started, I corrected, pulling her close. Our relationship deepened like roots finding fertile soil. Each shared morning, each quiet evening strengthened our bond. The lake witnessed our joy. Its waters carried our laughter during impromptu midnight swims, reflected our kisses during sunset surf sessions. One evening, unpacking the last box, I found a surprise, a framed photo from our first beach cleanup. Dozens of supporters surrounded us, all wearing determined smiles. Remember how scared we were? Natalie asked, wrapping her arms around me. Now look at us, I said, turning to kiss her. Our home filled with the warmth of shared purpose. Each room held memories of battles fought, victories celebrated, love deepened. The lake's rhythm became our heartbeat. Its waters reminded us daily of why we fought, why we stayed, why we loved. That night, watching Natalie sleep, I realized something profound. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as challenges. Sometimes love grows strongest when tested. Outside, the lake whispered ancient truths about persistence, about courage, about two women who refused to be silenced. Its waters carried our story, rippling outward like hope in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, but tonight, in our shared home, we had everything we needed. Each other, our cause, and the endless possibility of waves yet to come. Victory arrived in waves. First came the legal notice. Our documentation of Richardson Holdings' activities had triggered a state investigation. They're facing criminal charges, Natalie announced, reading the official letter. Her hands trembled with emotion. The cyberbullying lawsuit followed. Our careful recording of threats and harassment provided a solid case. Local police identified several paid trolls. The truth always surfaces, I said, holding Natalie close. Like a surfer after a wipeout. Richardson Holdings' reputation crumbled like sandcastles at high tide. Shareholders demanded accountability. Stock prices plunged. The company's CEO resigned. But the sweetest victory came in an unexpected form. Natalie's marine conservation program received major funding from a national environmental organization. They want to use Lake Caroline as a model, she explained, eyes shining. Show other communities how to fight back. The grant money would fund water quality monitoring, habitat restoration, and educational programs. Everything Natalie had dreamed of. My surf school thrived too. Students returned in waves, many bringing friends. Parents who'd once protested now volunteered at events. You changed minds, Sarah said during a lesson. Showed them love is just love. The lake celebrated with us. Its waters ran clearer each day as cleanup efforts progressed. Fish populations rebounded, wildlife returned. One sunny afternoon, the community gathered for a celebration. Local bands played while children splashed in the shallows. Food trucks lined the parking lot. Remember our first kiss here? Natalie asked, as we watched the sunset paint the water gold. How could I forget? I pulled her close. Best decision I ever made. Mrs. Peterson from the bookstore joined us, carrying the surfing book that started everything. Sometimes the best stories write themselves, she said with a knowing smile. The evening air filled with music and laughter. Former opponents chatted with supporters. Children played regardless of their parents' past positions. This is the real victory, Natalie whispered. Not just cleaning the lake, but bringing people together. Later, walking home under starlight, we passed the spot where vandals had once attacked my surf school. Now it bore a mural, waves, and wildlife in vibrant colors. From hatred to beauty, I mused, touching the painted surface. Like our whole journey, Natalie replied. At home, we celebrated privately. Soft kisses turned passionate as moonlight filtered through windows. Every touch carried the weight of our shared victories. Morning found us tangled in sheets, planning future adventures. The grant money opened new possibilities. More programs, wider reach, bigger impact. We could help other communities, Natalie suggested. Share what we learned. About water conservation or fighting bullies? Both. She traced patterns on my skin. They're connected, like everything else. The lake's morning mist carried promise like perfume. Each wave whispered of battles won, hearts changed, love triumphant. Our story had become part of Jackson's fabric. People spoke of before the lake cleanup and after, marking time by our struggle. But we knew the truth. This wasn't an ending. Each victory opened doors to new challenges, new opportunities to make difference. Ready for whatever comes next? I asked, watching sunrise paint the water. Natalie's kiss held all the answer I needed. Some questions don't require words when hearts beat in harmony with the tides. Outside, the lake continued its eternal dance with the shore, each wave a reminder that persistence prevails, that love conquers fear, that sometimes the bravest act is simply standing your ground. Together, we'd turned the tide, not just for ourselves but for an entire community. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. Dreams take shape like waves, first a ripple, then a swell, finally breaking into reality. Our joint surf and marine education center opened on a spring morning, sunlight dancing across the renovated boathouse. "Can't believe we did it," I whispered, watching Natalie cut the ribbon. The crowd's applause echoed across the water. The center represented everything we'd fought for. One side housed my expanded surf school, the other Natalie's research facility. The middle space served as a community classroom. "Perfect balance," Natalie said, leading the first tour. "Like riding a wave." Students filled the building with energy. Children learned about marine ecosystems before surf lessons. Researchers shared space with instructors. Theory met practice at the water's edge. Sarah, now my assistant instructor, helped organize the first combined program. "You two made this possible," she said, arranging wetsuits. The lake seemed to approve. Its waters stayed glass-smooth for beginner lessons, stirred just enough for advanced training. Even the weather cooperated. "Nature knows," Mrs. Peterson remarked, visiting with books for our reading corner. "When something's meant to be." Planning our future became a favorite evening ritual. We'd sit on our porch, watching stars reflect on water, dreaming bigger dreams. "We could expand to other lakes," Natalie suggested one night. "Share our model." "One wave at a time," I replied, kissing her temple. The annual beach cleanup drew record crowds that year. Families arrived early, carrying supplies and hope. Children competed to collect the most trash. "Remember our first cleanup?" I asked Natalie, watching the community in action. "When we found those documents?" "Seems like another lifetime," she smiled. "Look how far we've come." The sunset painted the sky in celebration colors: pink, orange, gold. As volunteers packed up, I pulled Natalie aside. "Walk with me?" I asked, heart racing. We strolled to our favorite spot where we'd shared our first kiss. The lake whispered encouragement as I dropped to one knee. "Natalie Anderson," I began, voice trembling. "You changed everything. My life, this lake, this community." Tears filled her green eyes as I continued. "Every wave reminds me of your strength. Every sunrise brings your smile. The ring caught evening light, sparkling like water. Marry me? Be my partner in all adventures?" "Yes," she whispered, pulling me up into a kiss. 1,000 times yes. Cheers erupted from behind us. The cleanup volunteers had witnessed everything. Sarah led the applause, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Peterson appeared with champagne. "I've been holding this since you two first met," she winked. The celebration lasted into twilight. Music played while couples danced on the beach. The lake reflected our joy like scattered diamonds. Later, holding Natalie under starlight, I marveled at life's currents. How one rare book led to endless possibility. How fighting for love transformed an entire community. "What's next?" she asked, ring glinting in moonlight. "Everything," I replied. Together. The lake lapped gentle agreement. Its waters held our story. Two women who found each other in a bookstore, fought for their love, and changed their world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new waves to ride. But tonight belonged to us, to love, to the endless possibility of hearts beating in rhythm with the tides. Some stories end, ours, it's just beginning, like waves that never cease, like love that grows stronger with each passing day. The lake knows, it always has. Its waters carry our promise into forever, one ripple at a time,